Hello and welcome everyone. In today's episode from IGL, I'll be showcasing how I've managed to do the interaction between the marble as well as the robot character, so that the player can essentially possess the robot and vice versa. Just to quickly show you what I mean, if I come over to this robot and I interact with it, I can then possess the robot and essentially control it, whether it's movement or jumping. And in the future development of this DLC, I will allow the robot to also hover in midair and fire the projectiles at possibly enemies. If I click the interaction button again while being a robot, I can go back to marble. And I can control the marble around the level. Another new addition to the DLC that I'm currently working on is this spider character, which will be an enemy character, so that the player will have to essentially jump on its head and slam onto it. For now, there is no interaction, as that's all I had the time for in the past few days or so. Currently, as you can see, there's just some basic animations set up for the robot that's walking as well as idle. If I just quickly go back to the robot, you can see that at the top of the screen there is a compass displaying the main objective of this DLC, which is to collect all of the cogs. Currently the compass is essentially assigned to the marble itself and it updates on the distance accordingly. If I go back to the robot, however, and I interact with it, now that I'm possessing the robot itself has got the compass displayed, as you can see, and it also updates the distance as well as the rotations of all of the objectives currently placed in the level. As for the overall gameplay experience, the player will be able to collect all of these bolts as well as screws and all of the similar components included in this DLC. I've worked on this bolt projectile so that if the player gets close to it, the bolt will increase its speed over time just to catch up to the player. It also has some bounce mechanics applied to it, so that if the bolt gets in the way of things, it will bounce off of surfaces accordingly. And once it catches up to the player, the overall amount of bolts increases. I've also managed to make the AI stop upon getting close to the player, so that now they can essentially walk around and then stop and focus on the player by looking at them, rotating the head. The overall interaction will be further implemented so that they can wave at the player or try to pass on a gift. I've also managed to work on a little bit of an inheritance for the collectibles that the player will be collecting. So with the actual screw, we will have a master blueprint, which would hold all of the logic for collecting all of the screws. So it will add 1 to the overall screw amount, as well as it will hold all of the logic for homing towards the player, as well as the overall projectile speed and the visuals. So what I've done is basically created this master blueprint and then created a child blueprint class for both of these screw types. So we've got one screw that's 3D and one screw that's 2D. The logic itself involves to follow the player around only for the mesh as well as the trigger boxes, allowing for overlap events. I'll further implement this system so that I can have screws on top of platforms, and the screws will move independently of the platform when chasing the player. Just to quickly show you this, we've got a few components here as projectile movement, which I've set all of these values accordingly. Then the overall movement component, you can see these values on the right hand side of the screen as well. And lastly, the rotating movement. With the screw 2D, if I just quickly jump into the portal to become the 2D marble character, you can see that right here we've got the 2D screw, allowing the marble to collect them inside of the 3D space. I've placed them around the tower just randomly for now, but I will be adding more obstacles to the platforming puzzles, so that the player can have a little bit better experience platforming across these towers altogether. The 2D screw holds all of the values as the master screw blueprint, since it is a child of the master blueprint for the screw type. So all I would have to do in order to make any changes to any of these blueprints is to edit the master screw, and that will update all of the screw types that I would have. The same goes for the cog types. For now I've only got a basic cog system which works similar to the screw, but it adds one cog instead. I've made the robot as well as the spider quite similar in terms of its inheritance to the collectibles, since I only have one master character blueprint which holds all of the movement behavior as well as all of the functions necessary for this to work. It holds both the values for the 2D character as well as 3D, and since I've made majority of these variables public, I can then select which character will be possessable and which wouldn't. If I quickly show you the robots, if I go into the humanoid, in here I've got a blueprint which is inherited from the masterclass, and in here it just holds additional perception component to allow the robot to see the player in sight. It would work the similar way for the spider, however for now I've only got the animation blueprint set up with 2 basic animations, but I will expand on this later. Anyway, thanks for watching this week's devlog for the Cognition DLC for Marvel's Razor's Wrath, and same as always, don't forget to subscribe, follow and obey. Peace.